guys, it's Will, Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. So this is going to be kind of like a loosely structured video, and I have a basic idea of what I want to talk about, but I might just go completely off the rails. It's also late. It's a coronavirus lockdown special. I've been in this apartment for 3 months. I've left a handful of times, but not nearly enough. And so what are we talking about today? And like I said, I will prove to you that this is not a shill channel for 88 films, because I've been covering so many of their releases recently because they're so awesome. They've been putting so much awesome stuff out this year, but we are going to be going in lots of different directions as the channel moves forward. And so today I'm talking about Jackie Chan and the Police Story series. So I recently acquired from a Criterion Collection flash sale the Criterion release of Police Story 1 and Police Story 2. This case is really cool. Check this out. So this is, how awesome is this artwork? It's so cool. I mean, come on. And then you have this again. There's a booklet in here. And then this folds out. There you go. And there's a poster here too. I can just show you. Well, I won't show you the whole thing because I'll have to do like a scroll across the screen, but you get the basic idea, right? So, Police Story 1 and 2, I mean, absolutely classic movies. I think there are a lot of people in the world who think that Police Story is maybe the best action movie ever made, or action martial arts hybrid, or whatever you want to call it. Police Story 2, actually, and this is probably like heresy to say, and I am going to watch both of these again on Blu-ray and give you a full review of the set, including all the bonus features and everything. I honestly think I prefer Police Story 2, but... and then I have the Hong Kong Rescue release of Super Cop. It's been a minute since I've reviewed a Hong Kong Rescue release. So I've reviewed their Hard Boiled release. I reviewed their Wheels on Meals release. Both of those are absolutely freaking incredible. And I picked up this is a re-release. They had put out Super Cop before, but then there was a 4K remastered like Blu-ray source that came out that they were able to go to and use to do like a new version, basically, of their release of Super Cop, like a new upgraded version. So Hong Kong Rescue, if you don't know, is like a fan-made, custom-made, basically it's like a bootleg thing, right? And so because it's not an official release, they can put tons and tons and tons of bonus features on here from other releases and various sources that they don't have to get the rights to them because they're not asking people for rights, basically, right? And so, but these releases are incredible, and I really do love them, and I really think that they're like of the highest quality. And I'm gonna, when I review that release, I'm gonna get more into the weeds of like the complaints people have about Hong Kong Rescue and what my relationship with their releases has been, and my kind of response to those complaints and stuff like that. And which isn't to dismiss anyone who has. I do think there are people who hate them on principle, which is very odd to me. Who just basically like, oh, it's an unofficial release, I can't stand behind it. I think that's a little bit bizarre. But there are people who have had, bad experiences, and I'll talk about that, address that when I talk about the Hong Kong Rescue releases. There's just so much stuff on here. There's the original Hong Kong version, which I think a lot of people just kind of call Police Story 3, and then the US version, which we call Super Cop. And I've seen both versions of the film. I actually was lucky enough to see the Academy, which is the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, who does the Oscars and stuff. They got like a film print, like a newly restored film print of the Hong Kong cut to add to their archives recently. And they had Jackie come and do a Q&A, and I actually live like a couple miles from one of the Academy's theaters, and so I went and saw that, and I saw Jackie speak for like an hour and stuff. It was an incredible event. But there's like hours worth of interviews on here, all these different audio tracks, audio commentaries. It's just crazy. So I'll be back with a review of that. And then just to show this off in case anyone cares, here's like an old Hong Kong DVD of Police Story 3 / Super Cop. So what did I want? That's really cool. Look at that disc. I wanted to talk kind of about the evolution of the Police Story series, and I recently watched Heart of Dragon because the 88 films Blu-ray of that came out, and I rewatched it. I've watched that like 3 times this year at this point. That came out in 1985, and Police Story came out in 1985. And I think that 1985 is really this kind of, this is where I'm going to start rambling. 84, 85, 86, I think, are absolute watershed years for action cinema. And I think that those 3 years are the years in which the modern concept of the action film was born. Because, if you read like film theory, film criticism, and stuff like that, the idea of an action movie as its own genre did not exist until the 80s, really, right? Because previous to that, you had what were essentially subgenres. So Bruce Lee was not really in action movies, right? He was in martial arts films. And with our modern perspective, we can go back and call them action movies. But at the time, they were martial arts films. And like Kurosawa did not make action movies. He made Jidaigeki, right, which is the sword fighting films. And he made like Yakuza movies, basically. Like that's what Drunken Angel is, right? Those are not action movies, really, in the way that we think of modern films as action movies. The only movies I think that you could really say are a direct correlation to modern action films would be like those kind of like Guns of the Navarone type movies, but those are adventure movies and those are war movies. They're not really action movies, right? So the concept of a movie existing purely to be a vehicle for action and as action cinema came into being in the 80s. And watching Heart of Dragon and watching the bonus features on there, and then getting Super Cop or Police Story rather, and thinking a lot about Police Story, and then I do work with 80s Nerdgasm, and we've been going through and listing the best movies of the 1980s, right? And you have these kind of like early prototype kind of action movies like Road Warrior, which was 1981, I think, right? Raiders of the Lost Ark, obviously 1981. But again, that's an adventure film, I think, more than it is an action film, especially because they were drawing from old adventure movies more than they were drawing. But like Star Wars, people would argue that Star Wars is a modern action film. I would argue that Star Wars is like a sci-fi kind of. I mean, Star Wars is basically samurai in space, right? So it's like a Jidaigeki, but as a science fiction film, right? But 1984, right, was like Beverly Hills Cop, Terminator, Missing in Action, the Chuck Norris film. And then you had in 1985, you had Commando, Rambo 2, American Ninja, and then in 86 you had Aliens, right, the James Cameron film, and Cobra, and then Armor of God, the Jackie Chan film. And then in 85, like I said, you have, in 86 in Hong Kong, you also have Better Tomorrow, right? So you have the arrival of John Woo, who was such a huge influence on action cinema. And then in 85, you have Heart of Dragon, and I think more notably, Police Story. The more I think about this, and again, this is not something that I claim to be an expert on, it's just something I've been thinking about. But Police Story really is, to me, because you can read about the evolution of Jackie Chan's style, right? And Jackie Chan, in an interview, actually, interestingly enough, on the Heart of Dragon Blu-ray, talks about how in 1985, when he was working on Heart of Dragon and when he was making Police Story, he really wanted to get away from the style of kung fu that was like on the beat, 4/4 time, like every hit on the beat, like that kind of kung fu film. And he wanted to develop different rhythms and incorporate elements of street fighting and incorporate guns, car chases, and make like what would essentially become the template for modern action films, but would also be like the new style of kung fu action. So if you look at like all these Donnie Yen movies like Killzone and Flashpoint and stuff like that, which I realize were hugely influential in their own right, and Donnie Yen helped develop like new styles of fight choreography and stuff like that. But I think that whole style of film, where you have like the serious cop movie, right, with the martial arts. I mean, Tiger on Beat is another example where you have like the Lethal Weapon kind of thing, but then Conan Lee is in it doing all these crazy martial arts, right? And there's so many movies like this. I'm just citing like a couple examples, right? But that whole genre, that whole concept of the modern Hong Kong guns, car chases, cop action movie, but with the martial arts style stunt, but not that old Shaw Brothers style fluid kind of martial arts on the beat fighting, was born of Police Story. Like it's like this watershed moment where Jackie Chan essentially completely changed the way that action films worked, and had a huge influence on Western action cinema too. Like Stallone was really influenced by, and in Tango and Cash, Stallone actually quotes Police Story. There's the scene in Police Story where Jackie Chan is standing in front of the bus and he pulls out his gun and the bus slams on the brakes and someone comes out of the bus, like crashes through the window. That's Stallone's character introduction in Tango and Cash is that exact same thing. Like Stallone pulls out a revolver on a truck and it slams on its brakes and someone smashes through the window, right? Like Jackie Chan was a huge, as a director, as much as, if not more so than a performer, a huge influence on American action cinema in the 80s and 90s, as was John Woo, right? But you also had in tandem American filmmakers like James Cameron. Like Terminator and Aliens were so important to the development of American action films as their own kind of thing. You also like Conan the Barbarian was around that time, and Conan the Destroyer, and you have these other films, but those, like the Conan films, are fantasy films. They are not, before they are action films. If you want to argue they're action films, feel free, but before they are action films, they are fantasy films. But so that, I mean, that's kind of like, I wanted to talk about Police Story, the importance of Police Story, the evolution of action cinema. You could write a book about this. We could do a feature film about it, but it's just something that occurred to me as I was thinking about this. The other thing that I want to mention briefly is Super Cop, right? So you're talking about Police Story in 1985, and then 7 years later, I think Super Cop 92? Yeah, you get, and it didn't come out in the US until 96, right? You get Super Cop, and there's a really cool bonus feature on the Miracles, which is a Jackie Chan film from, I think, 88, maybe 89. On the Miracles Blu-ray from 88 Films, there's a special feature where a guy talks about Jackie Chan as an auteur developing his own style, and he talks about how Golden Harvest was realizing that if Jackie Chan was going to be making these auteur-style films and taking years to make them, it was really going to cut into the amount of money they were making off him, and also his expansion into global superstardom, which was something that Jackie himself was interested in, right? So they kind of talked him into like, let's let some other people direct your films, right? And with that focus on working with other directors came a focus on international superstardom, and by that I mean the U.S. and Europe. I think more than anything, because he was already with the Police Story was a huge hit in Asia, so Jackie was already at that point a superstar throughout Asia, and he was I think a fan in the underground, like martial arts and Asian cinema underground in the United States, but not like beyond that. But then, they really started to look at, well, because Super Cop and then First Strike, which is Police Story 4. Are almost like 90s James Bond movies, like Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies, right? Like they move to all these different countries and locations, and there's like undercover stuff, and there's new characters that are brought into it, like Michelle Yeoh. I don't want to say she plays a Bond girl because she's whooping ass. Although she did play a Bond girl, right? Whooping ass all over the place, rather than just being this kind of like ornamental sex symbol, right? But you bring new characters into it and you make it more international, more espionage-y, if that's a word that you can use. And it becomes this kind of James Bond thing. And like they're filming in, like in First Strike, they're filming in like a former Soviet country. They're filming in Australia, right? Like all over the place with that movie. And then Super Cop, they go to, is it Malaysia? They go to Southeast Asia. And they're also, I think, in mainland China in part of it too, right? So it's this focus on expanding beyond Hong Kong and making these movies that, Super Cop is a violent movie, but it's not brutal. Tonally, it's not violent. It just has violence in it, right? If that makes sense. And then First Strike, it was PG-13. That was actually, I think, the first, that and Operation Condor were the first Jackie Chan movies that I saw in theaters when I was like, I think 12 or 13 maybe. And so that's like, I love that movie, and I loved it when I first saw it. It's like, obviously it's important to me because it's like the first Jackie movie that I really remember seeing. But it's really interesting to look at within the same series over the course of just these 3 films. You go from Jackie changing the makeup of 80s Hong Kong cinema and action and martial arts films in this very local way, but that expands globally, to Jackie looking at deliberately incorporating a global style and having an impact on the global market and global film industry. So this is just kind of a random rant, and I have talked for too long, and I apologize for that. Hong Kong Rescue release of Super Cop, I will be reviewing this once I get to it. And then the Criterion Collection release of Police Story 1 and 2. So excited to watch this and all the bonus features. This is Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. My name is Will. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.